But we're going to quickly here switch over to our panel discussion. The topic is diversity in archaeology. Our panelists include Alexandra Jones, Tommy Ng, Sidney Pickens, Jay Toth, and Jeff White. And I leave it up to them. I put their names in alphabetical order on the announcement, so you're welcome to not go in that order. But I was going to give everyone about a minute and a half to sort of introduce themselves, give a little background context if they need to, and then we'll jump into some questions that I have to kind of kick off the panel discussion. So I leave it to the panelists to introduce themselves.
I'm going to assume if we're going in alphabetical order, then is it by first name?
No, I went by last name, sorry.
Okay.
So that would mean you are first, Alexandra.
Oh, okay. All right. Either way. So I'm Dr. Alexandra Jones. I am an archaeologist. Clearly, I teach at Goucher University in the history department, teaching historical archaeology, as well as I'm the executive director of Archaeology in the Community, which is an archaeology education nonprofit that teaches youth all about archaeology. In addition, interestingly enough, we will be coming to Ohio starting in 2021 as well. So
that's exciting. Yeah, you had a whole minute and a half there, and you.
Okay, well, wait, I mean, there is. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought we were trying to get back on track, so I was shortening stuff. I'm also just a little bit more about me. I'm very big on my research interests are youth in archaeology education and community archaeology. So those are my two main focuses, looking at how do we engage with communities and get them more involved, and what does a truly I like to say an empowering community archaeology look like. Oftentimes we take too much control as archaeologists and don't give enough to the community. So redeveloping and refocusing how we conduct community archaeology.
Yes, I love all of those words. Those are all great. Same wavelength there. Next up we have Tommy Ng. Would you like to
hi, can anybody hear me?
Yes. Yes.
My name's Tommy Ng. I'm a partner and senior project archaeologist for Bison Historical Services based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. We do most of our work throughout Western Canada and the territories. The reason I have a connection here because I worked in Ohio from 2000 to 2005, so many of your members do know me. I still stay in contact. Hi, Andy. I also worked in West Virginia for about a year and a half. I guess they brought me. I guess they brought me in because in the CRM side of archaeology, I guess I was the only person of color that worked on the CRM side of archaeology. I believe I'm incorrect in that, but I'm just going to throw it out there. And in Canada, I am the only person of color in CRM in archaeology. So in a way, I'm kind of I'm a trailblazer in my own country. Most of my archaeology experience, besides Ohio and West Virginia, I'm mostly a plains archaeologist and a boreal forest archaeologist. But so far in the past few years, I've been spending a lot of my time up in the Rocky Mountains. I do a lot of indigenous archaeology. I also do a lot of First Nation consultation. So a lot of my archaeology involves working with various First Nations of various nations, just how to get them involved in archaeology and working in various projects and looking over at sensitive cultural sites and stuff like that. So there you go.
Cool. I just want to also mention Tommy is also really into Firecracked Rock, and we didn't get to talk a lot about it last time we chatted, but for those people who are crazy for FCR.
It's FBR where I'm from. You guys got it wrong.
Oh, well, there you go. We can get into that some other time. All right. And the next up we have Sidney Pickens.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sidney Pickens, and I am what I like to call like an emerging or developing budding scholar and professional in archaeology. I earned my bachelor's in archaeology and art history from University in 2018. And since then, I've been just kind of exploring the field as a whole and getting my hands dirty in different spaces, figuring out what is good for me. I've had internships at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I held a research position for the Slave Rex Project, and now I have the pleasure of working with Dr. Alexandra Jones with archaeology in the community. So one of my focuses is also community engaged archaeology, youth education with archaeology, and really figuring out how do we make archaeology a very tangible, exciting, immersive experience for little ones and incorporating them in the discipline early on. Like I said, I'm a little bit of everywhere. My research interests span from like anthropological approaches to Egyptology. I do maritime archaeology. Recently, I've gotten more into historical archaeology and the archaeology of the African diaspora. And I'll be applying to graduate school this application cycle. And so I'm interested in, again, exploring how, from a younger generation standpoint, like how we can increase diversity within the field itself. And so thank you for having me today. I'm excited for this talk.
Thanks for being here. We're going to move right along to Jay Toth now and have him say a few words about himself.
No, it's Gano. I'm tired and I'm enjoying it. No more tribal politics. That, you listen to the politics on a national scale. Well, that's what it's like every day. Since the day I started work, tribal politics is just as you see on TV on the national level. You go to work, you just never know if you have a job. So let's get a taste of what tribal politics is. I worked, I graduated from Youngstown State, also from the University of Cincinnati. From there, I went out and I was a tribal health director in Wyoming, Montana, and Alaska I was a health director for like 25 years. Came back, got my doctorate at Pitt, and taught at University of Fredonia. And Ho Chunk Nation brought me out. They started a historic preservation program there. And I worked out there for a number of years. And then my daughter graduated and we came back home and went back to work for Seneca Nation. So I have 20 years in preservation as well. What's been beneficial as far as working with this tribal health director is you get to work with a lot of the state and the federal government. So you get to know all those nuances and how to deal with them. But it's also very wearing. And that's why I'm saying I'm enjoying it, because I can lower bricks off your back trying to figure out who's on first and where to go next. But anyways, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, glad to have you here, Jay. And last but not least, Jeff White. Would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jeff White. I'm from Ohio. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. So as a kid, I always visited OHC, and that kind of got me interested in archaeology, as well as Egypt. So for me, my path, I sort of started off at University of Cincinnati, chose liberal arts, wasn't really sure what I was going to do. Kind of dabbled around with that, moved to Pensacola, moved back to Columbus and worked for Columbus Public School Systems for about 3 years. And then decided had a really good teacher that I worked with, and told her I was really interested in archaeology and also writing, and she was integral in me getting back to school. And so I ended up graduating from University of West Florida in 2004. At that time, I was which is very unfortunate, but at the time, there was one African American that graduated with an anthropology degree, and no one had graduated with an archaeology degree. So at that point in time, and really just backing up in my field school in 2002, I realized, being the only African American, that I needed to start a business that gets kids involved in archaeology. So during that time period, I started, thinking about some ways how to do this, and sort of came up with the brainchild, Archaeology, Can You Dig It? Also, I've worked at a few museums, the Fort Ancient, the Boone Shops, the Kosais, So because of all that and working with the school system, I got a lot of experience with science experiments and actually educating kids. And I feel like it's important just to diversify the field. Within about 15 years of me working in this field, I started off in the Southeast. I worked in 16 different states, like multiple times. And literally, I worked with a total of 7 African Americans. And, I think that's something that we can all do better at. It takes all of us. But for me, I want to reach them younger. I want to reach the younger age so they understand, like, moving on, what it's about. Because all of us here on the panel realize that there's still adults that think that we did dinosaurs. So that's not, we need to let them understand what it entails, and like everyone's history is important. And so without taking too much time, that's kind of like my life story. And, I've been doing this since, I developed it in 2009, I think it was. I took a few years off working at some science museums, picked it back up, and pretty happy with who I've reached to this point.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff, for that summary.
Yeah,
And thank you to everyone of our panelists for being here and participating in this panel discussion. So I think Jeff brought up some good points about diversity, and that kind of segues into the first question I'll put out to the panelists. I'll try to minimize my amount of time on here so that you guys have the most amount of time to talk. So I'm just going to ask questions and then only kind of prod from there if there's sort of a lull discussion, which I hope there isn't. What do you think primarily explains the lack of diversity in archaeology? And then I have some subsequent questions here, like, is it barriers to entry? Is it the perception of the relevancy of the topic? Is it the lack of engagement with diverse communities? Those are just some ideas to get us thinking. What do you think that primarily explains the lack of diversity in archaeology?
Well, I'll jump in. I think that's a loaded question. I think before we talk about why we don't see what we see in our field, we need to talk about what is wrong with our field first. And I think that's kind of always the moment of entry. How can we create a field that is open and inclusive to everyone? And what does that actually look like? And it's interesting because I've been engaging in conversation with a number of people around what does an anti-racist field look like? What does a new theoretical field look like? How do we create these spaces for it to be safe spaces for diverse people to be in? And what we have realized is that a number of our colleagues don't actually realize that the field of archaeology is not a safe space. It's one filled with microaggressions. It's one filled with direct aggressions. It's one in which we have to change the way in which we teach it, the way we actually perform it, and be more inclusive in that part. So I think before we can get at how do we diversify the field, it's how, as we as scholars within the field, change what we're doing. And in changing what we're doing, I mean changing the questions, changing the people and how we're addressing them, changing using the fact that we're using a Eurocentric form of science to address topics and questions of people who are not of Eurocentric descent. So I think once we start there and start to fix some of those issues, it makes it a way friendlier space for other diverse people to come in and to operate and to work.
This is Jay. I think on the Native community side of it, before you can even talk about getting people, Native students involved, you need to go back to the beginning here. There are barriers all along the way. There's a historical and social aspect here. You have boarding schools, which has given a negative connotation to education, and that is carried through today. Again, it's family support. Those families that want their kids to go on to college, you have to send them away from the Indian school. I had friends in Montana would say, well, those families that want their kids to go to college, they go to the outside the reservation to a public school, and those that don't care about their education stay at the Indian school. And that's true here in Salamanca, New York. The school here on the reservation, on the Allegheny Reservation, ranks 99 out of 100 schools in Western New York. 3% dropout rate. Not just trying to get people into students into archaeology, it's just trying to get them out of school. We're not even at that point. And then once we do get students to go to college, and Seneca Nation has offered a free ride for undergraduate and graduate school. And we have money left over every year because there aren't enough students that are eligible to go on to school or interested in going on to school. This is a closed community, and the kids, again, have a negative aspect of education. You know, it's like my daughter would get harassed, and they would ask, well, what kind of grades you get? You know, my daughter's, oh, you know, A's and B's, and they laugh. Who cares about A's? You know, the nation will take care of you. And most people end up spending the rest of their life here. And if you want to succeed, you have to leave. Even the families that want their kids to be good in lacrosse, they have to pick up and move away. And, you know, we did the same thing here. We went to Wisconsin. But, you know, then you're faced with this dilemma. You stay home and allow your children to have the cultural experience, or do you go away and create a future for them? It's a dilemma as a parent. And then once you get into college, you know, again, I remember folks out in the Northwest would say, Jay, how come you get these native students in college, but then they leave after a year? They don't know how to navigate the college experience. And my always recommendation is to get the student to join sports, or even if they sit on the bench, at least you got a coach to stand there, walk them through the system. You know, it's just like for my wife to get through. I find someone that's interested in Indian things. You know, someone to take them by the arm and say this way, and that way. They're just left out there in nowhere land once they get to college. And the other part of it, once you're there too, as far as picking a major, you know, anthropology don't reach out and grab somebody and work with them. You know, I was fortunate to have John White in Youngstown. You know, I started out as a forester. He grabbed me and said, you know, you're going to be an anthropologist. Okay. And they're off, you know, here I am today. They need someone to take an interest in them. And so that's pretty much in a nutshell on the native side. But keep in mind, too, as far as picking out a major, say anthropology. Anthropology has a negative view here on the reservations. Just look, Ohio don't have a burial law. What's that say about view of someone's culture and history and so forth? We're fighting over new work for what? Someone else's religion is we'll protect our religion. Pass laws in Ohio. Well, what about all the native sacred sites and stuff? No, they're digging up artifacts on the wall wherever on someone's table. So that's tough for some of these kids if they do get to college. Why do I want to do that for? Look what they did to us. So anyhow, sorry to go on, but I think that's pretty much it. Thank you.
I want to talk about just on the CRM side of things, and it's mostly going from my own Canadian context, and something the Canadian Archaeological Association has been discussing is just CRM is not a viable career, especially for a lot of people of I hate the term people of color, ethnic minorities here. Where you're coming from an immigrant family and you're poor, right? And you're going and you want to look for a job. You're looking for a job that's the sure thing, like becoming a doctor or a lawyer or engineer. You don't become an archaeologist. You can't make a living out of archaeology. That's basically it. We still hire seasonal workers. They never heard of CRM until a few months ago. A lot of people never heard of CRM. Even some of the clients I work for, they never heard of CRM. And before they realized we're a vital component of the environmental impact assessment. But in the end, a lot of people like me, I'm probably the weird one out, but they don't see it as a viable career. They don't see it as making a living out of it. And in a way, they're right. It's hard. CRM is hard. I see so many young people go through CRM and they stay maybe a good 2 or 3 years and then they just quit. They can't make a living out of it. Universities don't teach that. They don't teach about, at least the university here in Canada, they don't teach about CRM. They don't teach about the business side of things. They don't teach how to do technical writing or how to deal with proponents. And let alone the other difficulty part is First Nation consultation. I deal with a lot of First Nation consultation. I got one case where I found a site, and it's pretty sensitive because the First Nation, they see the cultural significance of it. The government only see the archaeological side of it, and they're butting heads over it. So it's basically, you could say, if you step back, you could say it's basically the white man is right, the red man is wrong. Let's just go with that. So there's some conflicts with that. So because of that, the indigenous side, the indigenous people, the Blackfoot, they're kind of pissed off because to them they figure like what they feel is not important enough, and that's putting them off on archaeology too. So that's the context I'm working on and I'm coming from. So there you go.
Jeff, are you gonna go?
I'll wait for you.
Okay, thank you. Just to add on to what everyone has said, I feel like there is, the answer to your question, Eric, is that it's a little bit of all of the above, or all of those questions that, is it this, is it this, is it that? It's a combination of those things, and I don't think any of the issues that we're looking at, they happen in a vacuum. Like for people of color, for people who have been underserved in the communities, like these things intersect. We have these intersecting identities and intersecting oppressions. And in order to address those, like back to what Dr. Jones was saying, is that to do like radical self-reflection, and like the organizations who have been traditionally like non-inclusive and lack diversity have to actually do the active work of sitting and working through their policies, the systems, all these things to see where can we make space to make this an affirming space. And then also to what Tommy just said, also Jay, what people need changes depending on where they are in their development and their growth. And so the reasons for the lack differs depending on that. So a kid might not be interested in archaeology because they don't have exposure to it. A college student might not be interested in it because they can't find the funding for it. Once you get out of school, then like Tommy was saying, there's not a viable career path. And so it's a matter of how do we make this discipline accessible? How do we make it exciting, engaging, and how do we bring it in early on? And to say this can be viable, like there are opportunities here. There are ways to keep people engaged. I think those are the main things that needs to be worked through. But then again, the first thing is let's stop, think, and reflect. And a lot of people don't want to do that. They're doing all of this work. And a lot of times people haven't. And so it's a matter of let's see where can we affect change and then start doing that work from there.
So so I'll probably mess this up. I'm not sure if you can see me on the screen. I guess I'm just going to talk so I don't mess things up here. All right. So basically, I think everyone's correct. I think it goes back to, archaeology as a whole and what it's about in anthropology. All right. So in 2002, again, back at my field school. So myself being the only African American there, and it was very comfortable there. Like I didn't have problems at my school. Everyone was, I got along with people. But so two of my friends asked me the same question. Why do I think that it's lacking in diversity in the field of anthropology? And so one of their responses was exactly what Tommy said, is that, well, sometimes when individuals that don't necessarily have every opportunity to go to college, they want to choose what's going to give them an opportunity to take care of themselves or their families for the rest of their lives. So I think there's a little bit of that in there as well. And I absolutely think it's diversity. I absolutely think that it's exposure. If you're not being exposed to something, then you don't know what it offers. I think it also goes back into our field of anthropology not doing the best job. Coming out now, 15, 16 years later, still being able to work in the field and being respected in the field by pretty much everyone I know. Now it doesn't hurt so much for someone to tell me, oh, you have a bachelor, so you're not an RPA, you're not a professional archaeologist. But at the time when I graduated, and I worked just as hard as everybody else, alongside with people with their masters and whatnot, and rubbing shoulders with people that had their PhDs and being respected by them, it hurt then, because at that point it's like, oh, so I guess my degree, I just have a high school diploma. I'm not considered a professional with this bachelor's. So I think that also lends itself to someone being, okay, if I have been exposed to this, should I delve into this and give it my all? And if you are not sure that it's going to take care of you financially, then it is tough. There was my parents. I was, just a little backwards. I didn't follow the track of, go to college 4 years, graduate. I took a break. I was liberal arts at first. I went and taught at the school. So my parents were like, you should pick something that's going to be, you're a couple years behind now. You should pick something that's going to take care of you. And everything I said to them was, it's my mom and dad. It's like being a starving artist. Once you get in there, you're going to find some people and get further along and further along. And it's right. On average, it was about 3 years where people get out of CRM or archaeology in general. So I think, just to backtrack, I think it's anthropology with us not giving full value to everyone's culture, because anthropology is about culture. It's about different ethnicities, and it's about the importance of it. And so I think the lack of exposure, I think putting tiers on archaeology like that, like if you have, it surprised me here that there was a college here that had a 2-year program in archaeology. And I was surprised. I was like, you didn't take any of this or that. But you know what? When we work with them in the field, they were taught all the technical aspects of archaeology. And they knew just as much as the rest of us that took 4 years or more. So I think it's that. I think it's recognizing the importance of everyone's culture. I think it's not putting archaeology on a tier set. Like, you're not going to make it with a bachelor. Good luck, buddy. And that's just not fair to the overall scientific field of anthropology and archaeology.
Yeah, that's a good point. I said I would keep my comments to a minimum, but I just I have these questions that are sort of here for us to talk about, but I want to sort of feed off of what everyone's talking about. It sounds like I'm hearing things about mentorship, outreach, barriers with sort of gatekeeping. I think something that Jeff really talked about was credentials, like you don't have an RPA or whatnot. And maybe we want to dive into that more, or I'll leave it up to the panelists. I know the Archaeology podcast just did a whole episode talking about, is the RPA still relevant? That could be a whole discussion in of itself. I'm currently not an RPA. For shame, the president-elect isn't on the RPA. But just my educator's opinion, and then I'll shut up, is I feel like there's a real relevancy gap between archaeology and cultural anthropology. Having taught at Tri-C for about 2 years here, the students who sign up for my archaeology class is almost predominantly white males and then a few white females. But when I have my cultural anthropology class, it's the most diverse class I have. And I think there's a reason behind that, because when you think of archaeology, you think about digging up old stuff or stuff in the past and not changing the present. And I think it might be a sort of a branding issue as well, just as archaeology is a discipline, which sort of gets back to what Alexandra was talking about, of like making a safe space, but also making a space that people realize, how can we affect change and be active and engaged in a way that cultural anthropology is, because they're dealing with current issues. They're like, I have to talk about race and racism in my cultural anthropology class. And you look at an archaeology textbook, it's not necessarily clear that that's a component of curriculum and coursework. So I guess my question is, what does that sort of safe or ideal archaeology look like to you guys?
I would say this is something that the SBA brought up earlier this summer. And it's a very important kind of point that what I hear coming through, and where I think there's starting to be a disjoint. There is the act of doing archaeology and the science of doing archaeology. Everybody's trained in that. That's essentially the the actually going out, the excavating a site. I think what the nuance part is that oftentimes keeps getting lost is what beyond that. What questions are you asking when you go into the ground? And let's just say going for to CRM context or any variation in between. Once you pull those artifacts, what are you asking of that landscape, and what in-depth questions are you asking? And then what knowledge do you bring to bear? And I think that's where the background starts to come in. If we're going to start at the base level, college level, what classes are you teaching your students? None of my students come into a class and have an quote unquote intro to archaeology class. We're going to study, look at the theory. We're going to look at the history. We're going to talk about different forms of archaeology and what that looks like in different diverse communities. And then you, as we like to say, decolonize your syllabus. And I think that's one of the problems that most students, especially on the undergraduate level, don't have exposure to decolonized syllabi. You get the same old textbook, and that's all we ever challenge you with, versus actually letting you read scholarly work by archaeologists who are going above and beyond, who are asking these important questions, who are actually doing the research of learning about the community in which they're actually studying, whether it's from a CRM context, because we have some CRM firms that do phenomenal work in the Mid-Atlantic, they have a little bit more leeway. We're starting to realize that they're starting to get a pushback where more firms are being challenged to do community outreach and community work with their contracts. So in that, it's now giving them some leeway in order to do more. I'm personally working with a project right now that brought me in to help with community engagement. And interestingly, it was the developer. It wasn't the actual who wanted this added component. So going further and beyond. So I think we need to be careful in starting with the education system. And I mean, how we as archaeologists are trained in general, because that's where the looking at folks and the issues and the questioning, because most of us have only been trained under this system of pure science, that when we get to the harder questions of how do we do this in, if you want to say, an anthropological manner or a way in which is more inclusive, most people have never been challenged in their undergrad to ask these harder questions, to think beyond just this very Eurocentric way of doing a science. And I do think that's part and parcel what starts to come in as well.
If I can share a couple things here, I agree with what everybody's saying here. But as a student, you get these theories, and now that I'm older, I look back on a lot of these things. A lot of anthropological theories about a lot of the prehistoric sites and stuff, I come to call it the bar room theory. A bunch of white guys go to the bar and they come up with a theory, and and that's what we're fed in college. And then I remember sitting there at one point thinking, you struggle with what you're being told in school versus what culturally and socially you know about certain things. And I basically had to put the stuff from school aside and go with what I know, and it turns out, to be correct. And I think that's a failure of not having Native students and those from other cultures and minorities not part of the program. You're not getting the other insights. But also, I have trouble when you come back with, once you do get your degree or whatever. Now I'm sitting there, and this is for you folks that do CMR. You sit there and you talk to folks and they'll say to you, well, now that you got a degree, you think like they do. And I know exactly where they're coming from. We're back to that barroom theories, and And I think that those folks discussing native culture at the bar have no clue what they forget that native people are people, you know. And I always use the term, you know, they think that native people are like leprechauns. You talk about them, but you never see them, you know. And then the other thing for, you know, folks that are in archaeology, you need to get to the schools, you know, and present things there. But anyways, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Here in Alberta, every year we do the university here do a career fair where all the CRM companies go and talk about what CRM is like. The thing is, there's no structure to it because every company goes up, they show up, they talk about what the company can do, and basically it's the same thing what every company does. The thing is, a lot of these companies, a lot of the presenters, they pretty much present a dim view of CRM. Basically, it seems like their job is trying to sway students from going into CRM, and when they should inspire them to go into CRM, inspire them to do archaeology. It's like a lot of the owners, you see these students as potential competition, so they just don't want them to go into CRM. I mean, CRM here in Western Canada is pretty small, but we can be accommodating. We can be. I mean, we're always busy every year. Even in winter, we're busy. We always have work up in the boreal forest, and we're always looking for people. And yeah, you got these. Let's just say, white men. They're just telling all these potential students, that don't go CRM. It's horrible. The money's bad. We're going to use you up. And so it makes me mad when I go to these career fairs, and I usually tell these guys to F off because they're idiots. And so, and I take it upon myself to inspire students. It doesn't matter what background and I also take it upon myself to especially inspire Indigenous students, because we don't have enough Indigenous people in CRM. We have Indigenous archaeologists, but I only can name 1 or 2, at least here in Western Canada, that are in CRM. But they're still at the what you guys call it, the field tech level. They're not what we call the licensing level or permit holder level in Alberta. The other thing is, in our CRM, we're getting more involved in First Nation consultation. We end up talking more. We're talking more with various Indigenous people regarding archaeology, and we're hiring we're hiring more Indigenous people onto our crews and stuff like that. It's pretty much almost a requirement under federal law. If there's a capital project in Canada and they're working under CIA, the Canadian Environmental Act, it's pretty much a requirement. And so I take it upon myself to try to inspire them to hopefully at least get 1 person to go into CRM and stuff like that. But the issue they have is they find pretty quick in how there's a difference between how archaeologists see things and how their own people see things. There's a difference between cultural significance and archaeological significance. And usually there's a clash. And there seems to be a hard time to reconcile the two, because the archaeology side, there's a law. They have to follow what the law dictates, but it doesn't take into consideration the cultural aspects of CRM. So there's a lot of grumblings between the 2 aspects. One of the projects I'm working at is there's a cultural significance, and the archaeology is being pushed back, or it's insignificant, and there's a lot of grumblings about that because of sensitivity of this project, we're doing this because there's a cultural significance, and a lot of the archaeologists are they're doing it because it's a job, but to them they think it's a dumb thing to do. When we should be doing it because it is significant. Maybe it's not significant archaeological, but it's significant culturally. It's all sites are significant, and we should just think that way. But somehow we're just thinking 2 things. Somehow we're thinking those 2 are just different. So there you go.
An ideal archaeology looks like to me a space where heritage is shared and not consumed. And I think that's truly just the most important thing, that people are respecting the cultures, that we as academics, as CRM people, as scholars, everyone is like releasing this idea of ownership over the material that they're working on and making sure that this is really a community-centered space. I think archaeology should be intergenerational. It should be, like I said, community-centered and driven. Your research questions should be informed by community members where you are. I believe strongly that we need to elevate indigenous forms of like not whatever the in whatever space you're in, like you should be looking to indigenous peoples and also just indigenous communities that are there for like what are the things that they are interested in exploring and going from that. Also, back to your point, Eric, earlier where you said there's this kind of disconnect between the cultural aspect of archaeology, that those two are married. And as archaeologists, we're interested in the past and should be really putting in the forefront when we're having these conversations with people that the past always informs the future. And things that are happening back then are very present today. And there's a very clear like link of continuity. There's connection there. And so reestablishing those links for people, making those very clear, again, making them relevant, explaining and exploring how, like why this stuff is important, how it's culturally viable, how studying in the past can help change and provide examples, or good examples and bad examples for what to do, not to do moving forward. So that is for me what I do archaeology. Just a little snippet of it.
I don't mean to jump in again, but just for time purposes, I figure we might want to shift gears, take 15 minutes here to sort of kind of come up with our thoughts on what does this mean for organizations like the OAC in terms of, because I think Al Tonetti posted a question as well as maybe some others, and sort of like tangible things that we can do. Obviously, Alexandra talked about self-reflection. So obviously it always starts with the individual and, reflecting on how we can better ourselves individually, but then how can we as an organization improve what we're doing to self-reflect in terms of like addressing problems of access, accessibility, not commercializing or consuming archaeological data, and other ways that we might be able to address those. And then, so we'll take about 15-ish minutes for that. And then I want to open up for maybe some other people who are on the call to maybe ask questions so that we can have people engaging in conversation. Sound good? Cool. So go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, what OAC can do now is just listen, like to what's been said in this conversation. Utilize the resources that are already there throughout the entirety of this session. I've seen like the chat blowing up with different resources. Utilize those. I think the biggest problem that we face, or that I've seen being faced, is that people they want to create something new and fresh, which is exciting, which is good, but there are systems and examples that are already in place that you can use, that you can take templates from, borrow from, switch it up and flip it for whatever is good for your own needs. And then also, like, while it's good that we're having this conversation has been had many a times. And so like now it's like from moving from this conversation to, like you said, what are the action items? Like what are bylaws for membership? Maybe each member has to go and present at a school or something. Like, how are you including community work in things? Like, think actively about stuff. Have conversations amongst your board, like what can y'all do to actually increase the exposure and actually make them, excuse me, for a better word, good. Like, are people, like, is this actually going to increase access? Is this actually going to have people want to say, oh, I would like to really actually explore this? How are you advertising? Those are a couple of things that come to mind.
Yeah, sorry. Try this one more time with the screen. But so I agree. I think one way to do that is what we're doing right now, is what you are doing right now. Partnering with folks that are interested in diversifying the field. If we're talking about African Americans, Black History Month, libraries are great. I've had a great response from the libraries for Black History Month. If it's a library out in the richest area or a library in the poorest or the rural, like everyone's treated the same. So you have to get out there. You have to research and see where schools are lacking, not necessarily just focusing on the schools that are already have the capability to have somebody like an OAC come in, or an outreach program, or a COSI come in. And we got to focus on the schools that don't necessarily have that, and not discount it to, well, are we going to get paid from this, or are we going to make enough? No, it's exposure. Because if we're exposing, again, I keep using that word exposure. That's the whole reason I started this. So if we're exposing people, then you give them the opportunity to decide if they want to do that or they don't want to do that. So it's not necessarily about a money thing here. There's, in Columbus, everybody lives here. There's plenty of schools that are being underserved here, and their ethnicity or their culture is not really being represented in school. When I was a kid, I never got archaeology in school. It was kind of, I had to find it on my own. And I think when you're doing those types of things and making it cool, like I make it cool, man. Because I learned that from working in science museums. Like, I did science theater. I had crowds watching me. So if you're not making it, we got to get away from the humdrum archaeology. I remember there was the kid in me, I was watching, I think it was like Hank Hill, back then when that cartoon came on the Hills or whatever. And so they had a archaeologist come on there, these are animated characters. And so Hank Hill's wife was so excited that they were going to be excavating in the backyard. So he comes there, he's pompous, he's like very standoffish and like, So she's like, she excavated and she found a piece of a ceramic, but she called it a pot or something like it. Look, honey, I found a pot. And he's like, no, that's a ceramic. And it's just, we have to get away from that stuffiness and not making it feel like it's something that you can do. Like you can do it. You can do you can do it. And I also think it's very important to have just as much experience in the field as the lab. Like an archaeologist that is well trained has experience in both, not just in the field because you're, or in the lab. It's both. It's all together. So I think exposure, man, like exposing the kids that are not being exposed to this. And I love it. I treat them all the same. I'm not going to treat anybody different. I love when I have a variety of ethnicities there, and I love that. So it's exposure. Just, we got to get out and find it. It's been very difficult. I equate it to, I'm 45. I'm from the 90s. Starting this thing was like selling tapes out of a trunk. Cold calling people, telling you no, emailing no, go to see them, no. But we just have to keep kicking down doors to reach that population that's not being reached.
So to build upon what everybody is saying, going back to Sidney's, don't reinvent the wheel. Something interesting about this year has been that the pandemic allowed everybody to stop, and in stopping, everybody has started to reevaluate and reflect. There are a number of webinars on this very same topic. There are a number of organizations who are biting at the bit to partner with organizations they've never worked with. And the phenomenal thing is that you're at a crossroads where not only can you expand and develop, but you can actually expand and develop all throughout Ohio and beyond, which means that you can actually make your influence felt larger than just the state because of this new digital age. So kind of embrace it, move forward with it. Start at the education stage. You have to, as an organization, educate yourself, which means sitting down, watching some of these webinars, having discussions about them, and then talking about, okay, how do you then take the lessons and the things that you just learned and move forward as an organization in order to be better? Now, what do you have that's unique about Ohio that you can spread with everyone? And how do you look at all of the diverse groups that make up Ohio? So one of the things is we oftentimes, when we go in as schools, people get real cliche, and it drives me up a wall. They go to Egypt, they'll do underwater archaeology, You may, depending on what state, Virginians love a Civil War site. Yeah, that's not interesting to every kid. Most people don't want to look at stuff that actually highlights. So one of the things that we do is we pick different sites and we cover different ethnic groups and we talk about different things within it. We also bring in guest speakers because we are not jacks of all trades. The last thing I would say is really partner with organizations that are the experts at what you want done. There are plenty of us out here who, if you want youth education, who do that. If you want exposure on anti-racist movements within archaeology, there are organizations that are focused on that. There's plenty of webinars. SHA is holding a webinar coming up about just that specific thing, moving beyond statements. So stop making statements and what does it actually look to do the work? So there's a lot of things that can be done that would move us forward. And that at this point, I would say for all of the months that have happened within this year, there's so many people who've already done the legwork. You could actually just kind of jump on the bandwagon and get caught up and, you know, learn from what they've put out and kind of just run forward from here.
Well said.
I totally agree with Alexandra, Sidney, and definitely Jeff. A couple of years ago, we were excavating the site, and we were lucky enough to have a bunch of school children from the local Blackfoot Reserve. And because they were so excited, I got excited, and I got excited showing them the various artifacts, the various projectile points and stuff like that. And I remember one kid, he held in his hand this projectile point that's about 2,000 years old, and he got excited. His eyes just lit up, right? And this was, they just got in their head. They were holding a piece of history, a connection to probably their own history, and hope that kid gets inspired by it. And because of that, I was excited. I was showing how inspired I was, and everybody else in the crew got excited too. And we got everybody excited, and we were hopefully got all these kids were just having fun. And so, but we also tempered that excitement. We also told them, like, what we're doing is really, really cool, but it's also a lot of hard work, and it's also can be very, very tedious. So in a way, in that way, we were selling ourselves. We were trying to inspire these kids to get into these Blackfoot kids to get into, hopefully maybe one of them get into archaeology, or maybe perhaps CRM. And so we can be good salesmen. We can sell this. We just had to show what got us involved in the first place, and we got to show the excitement to the next generation. Recently, I got a text from a friend of mine, Kevin Blackplume. He's with the Conine Nation, and we were talking. He said somebody else, I think Bill Perry of the Parks Canada, got him excited into archaeology, and now he's moving towards getting his master's in archaeology, and he's planning to go into CRM. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing him in a couple of years and work with him. It's be nice to have another person who's not white in CRM. So there you go.
Good point about the Blackfeet. You know, there's different perspectives among the different tribes. Working with Ho Chunk Nation in Wisconsin, you know, kids are really interested, just like, you know, the Blackfeet were. You come to New York, you know, and the nation here has, you know, what they call summer internships. You pick out some department that you want to work with, and you get paid for the summer, so you can find out what they do and so forth. You know, I could never get anybody to work for the Tribal Historic Preservation Office. Everybody wanted to go work for the Fish and Wildlife. So it was really hard to get students. Again, you know, just different tribal perspectives and local environment, whatever. But yeah.
Jay, I will say something that worked for me. I worked with the Zuni, godly, now 9 years back, doing a youth project there. And one of the things that I went above and beyond, I recognize representation matters. And we can deny it, and we can say that, oh no, well, I'm sensitive enough, I understand. I searched high and low and literally brought in all my connections to find a Zuni archaeologist who wasn't actually part of the tribal archaeology group, because I wanted somebody that the children didn't see all the time, but that could also attest to how being Zuni aided in being an archaeologist and how this actually helped and went beyond. And this person doesn't live on the res, but they come back and they still participate. So they were very much a community member. But that was I was very gung ho about it because I know my own experiences in being in DC and how much seeing me means to kids in DC who are from DC. And so I did the same thing. And to see the change in how the students acted and saw became that moment where I every time I do a program, I go above and beyond to find, and trust and believe, representation is not that big. So we all know how hard it is to find somebody. But that's something that I've started to really employ, to your point, because kids do get excited, but everybody's different. And we can't make an assumption that just because a person I understand or I may be of, in some way, shape, or form the same group, that I'm going to reach a particular group. Sometimes kids really need to see somebody that looks like them doing it. And I think that's something else that I want to impart and also put forth to the Ohio Society, is that representation matters. And sometimes you need that.
And just to piggyback off of that, representation not only matters for youth, but for the young academics people as well. Like, I have had the privilege to be under the mentorship of Dr. Alexandra Jones for the past year and a half, and I have kind of attached myself to her hip a little bit. But I have learned so much, like as an educator, as an archaeologist, and how to do this community engaged work. And it's because I've had a prominent example of what that looks like, and we can have conversations about it. And so, like, again, as a person who's I am entering this field, I have experience, but I also have something to look towards. I'm like, this is what this can actually look like in my future. And that's exciting. And that is encouraging. That gets me invested within this work. So thanks, Alex.
Yeah. And thank you to everyone for joining this panel discussion. I think those are some good remarks to sort of transition to opening up the floor to questions from people on the call. But before we do, I just want to what I've gleaned from this are 3 big words, and maybe someone wants to add more to them, but I feel like I heard inspire a lot, and I certainly feel inspired: reflection and exposure. I feel like those 3 words have been really sort of a through line for a lot of this. But with that, let's open up the floor to people who might have questions, either on the chat or if they're muted, if they want to talk. And then other housekeeping things real quick. I figured we'll give about 15 minutes here, and then we're immediately going to just jump into lunch. I would like to start our next section of the conference or meeting at 1. So really, if we spill beyond 12:30, that's fine, but that just means your lunch is going to get abbreviated if you're still hanging out in this conversation. But I just thought I'd throw that out there. So I open up the floor to any questions. Well, I have one question here from the chat.
Question.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, because we know there is a lack in African Americans in the field of archaeology, and even for myself, just trying to navigate through the field and figure out how can I make my work, relevant to the community, giving a voice to the African American community, and sort of changing the interpretations and the type of questions that are asked. Mentorship, I feel like, is just a huge component, and being able to reach out to other people who are also in the field that you sort of connect with. So what would you suggest for, a young grad student who's trying to find their way in the field, as far as being able to do that? I don't know if there's any Black archaeologists in Cincinnati at all. So just what were some things that helped you navigate through the field when you were starting out?
So first and foremost, I'm on the board of the Society of Black Archaeologists. So that's going to be my first suggestion to you, is that it's a whole organization dedicated to the promotion of African diasporic archaeology and those interests. So I would definitely say join the SBA, because then you end up finding, and you have access to a whole membership directory of everybody. And with me saying that, SBA is not only limited to African American archaeologists. It is open to anybody who does African diasporic archaeology as well. But I didn't have that benefit when I came through archaeology, being 100% honest. And I experienced some really unpleasant things that went far beyond just microaggressions to direct, overt racism within this field. And it took tough skin. It took, honestly, talking to female archaeologists, white female archaeologists who at the time had gone through the same issue, because when they were in graduate school, they were some of the first women to be in the field. So listening to their experiences, getting advice from them. And then the realest conversation I ever had was from somebody who I absolutely love and I adore him to this day, is older gentleman. He's an archaeologist. He literally gave me the advice, which was, piss or get off the pot. If this is what you want to do, I mean, that's his exact words. If this is what you want to do, then you're going to have to dedicate yourself to it. And with it comes these hurdles. That means you're going to have to deal with all of this. So in that became, that's fine. And I am going to tough it out and move it on, but I'm not going to leave this field the same way I came into it, which means that at every turn, I am going to make sure my voice is heard, make sure that I make it easier for that and those who come below me. And it doesn't matter what you look like or who you are. I've kind of taken it on, which is why I founded AITC, was to make sure children everywhere have the opportunity to learn about archaeology, and from people that look like you, from people that don't look like you, from every minute site that there is in the world, from whatever you're interested in. We're going to figure out a way for this to be a safe space that you can grow up in, that you can cherish, that you can love, and that you can flourish in. And I think that's kind of going back to that whole ideal accessible thing. That's where we're at. So start with SBA in order to give you a start for finding, and we have Zoom meetings and everything else. So there, you can definitely get involved and jump in now. But there are a lot of us out here who are doing this work. And I want to be very clear. And when we talk about us, this just doesn't mean people of color. There are also a lot of people who are white, who are also accomplices, who are doing this hard work, who are out here making it safe spaces. So don't always assume that your mentor, your biggest ally, or person in the dirt with you is going to also look like you.
I think that's great, and I think that's exactly what we're doing. Like, I read the article that you were involved in, and it's absolutely true. Like it takes more than just African Americans to diversify, or the American Indian, or whatever your ethnicity is. It takes us as a whole to diversify the field. So, and then that's all I wanted to say about that. I totally agree. It takes us as a whole to do that.
Sorry. Piggybacking off of what Alex said, yes, I would definitely suggest the Society of Black Archaeologists. That has been a very welcoming and tender space for me, coming into the field. I've connected with, like I said, Dr. Jones and a number of other archaeologists through that space. And like I said, there are Zoom meetings, conversations. There are always different talks that are happening, and you can connect with people that way as well. And while her experience coming through was tough coming up, I think they went through hell and hot water for the next generation to not have to do that. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you for that, because for me, it feels like I found this space with mentors that I can go to, can talk to, and it feels safe. It feels secure, and I get good advice. And I get good advice from a number of different people. On the SBA side, they have literally a list of all the members kind of their research interests and stuff. I'm not sure if they have their like emails or whatever, but you can reach out to things, and that I think is a really good start to doing it.
I have one question from the Twitch chat, but I'll hold off on that one because it segues into something else I want to bring up. If anyone else in the WebEx call has any questions before I get to that question. Hearing none, I think this is a good time. This person, I think it's Tasha again, asks, when is archaeology in the community coming to Cleveland? Which I think segues perfectly to something I wanted each of you to sort of wrap up with, and doing any plugs you want to do for things that you think are important, either ways to reach out to you, things that you think we should turn our attention to, whatever you want to plug. Sorry, that's me. Having listened to lots of podcasts, there's always the plug segment. So this is your opportunity to plug something that's really important to you.
Okay, so it's in the works. It hasn't been guaranteed. It's not Cleveland, just for specification. But it's the ink hasn't sealed and it hasn't gone through yet. But we have a wonderful, generous donor who really specifically loves AITC and volunteers with the AITC, who is essentially gifting AITC land in Ohio in order for us to expand into Ohio. So yes, that is what looking like in 2021, we will begin that process of envisioning what that will look like and beyond, if that will be a facility, if that will be, the home base of what AITC is or what that looks like. So it's coming, but it's definitely something that will be 2021, 2022. And best believe we will partner with the Ohio Archaeological Society as a programmatic partner moving forward with that. So no worries, you will know. One of the things I would like to plug, since we do have a small moment, today, CHAT, the Contemporary Historical Archaeology and Theory organization, which is a British-based archaeological organization, is having their week-long festival, and it kicks off today. Colleagues and I are featuring a film, and I put the link for the film, so if you're interested and want to register, and it's called Black in Archaeology. And one of the things in all of these conversations we've been having, we decided to actually have a real candid conversation outside of the normal conference space and just do a film where we've asked 5 archaeologists, what are your experiences in being Black in archaeology? And so it's essentially a documentary with each of them answering a number of questions around their experiences, how they feel, and it concludes with what their vision of an anti-racist field would look like and how we move further. And it is a short film. It was something that we put together just kind of starting out, and something that we want to explore and make it longer eventually. But if anybody has time, it starts at 4:00 today. The film runs, it's 45 minutes. And then there's a live Q&A with myself and the other 2 co-producers. So if you are interested, it is a great way to get insight into how fellow archaeologists feel and some of their experiences that they've had within the field.
That's 4 p.m. Eastern time, right?
Yes, I'm so sorry. Yes.
No, it's okay. I forgot about that same issue too when I had a call with Sidney earlier this week, and it was essential. So, anyone else have any other plugs that they want to do or things that they want to promote?
I'm gonna say, I find myself becoming more of a role model now. I just found out I'm one of the old guard of Alberta archaeology. All the previous generation, they have retired or moved on. So, and I found myself, as a role model in terms of I'm helping all the younger archaeologists, and I find myself teach them everything I know about CRM, the lab work, talk a bit about their technical writing, even about the business. I find myself doing all that kinds of stuff. So, and it seems like I'm getting a lot of feedback from a lot of my seasonal workers, and they seem pretty happy about it. That they seem really appreciative that I didn't treat them as just field technicians, but I treat them as archaeologists, and I'm showing them a bit of the ropes and how to do things and stuff like that. And it's not and that's for anybody. And so I figure we should become role models if that is what you choose, and you should just, and then I find myself enjoying it, and I find myself enjoying inspiring other people.
So yeah, obviously, selfless plug, archaeology, can you dig it? We're working hard. We're a one person show, along with some support from some people that we care a lot about. But during this time of coronavirus, has been hard for us. We're doing all we can. We got we got digital cameras and whatnot. So we're happy with that. But just continue to support us. Everybody needs support during this time. We all should support each other, and it's a great thing. Folks feel it's a great thing, and we do as well. So just continue to support us and spread the word.
Absolutely. Any other plugs or things that people want to put the word out there and promote?
Hi, Eric. It's Megan.
Yep.
If it's okay, I just wanted to give a quick plug for, I put this in the chat as well, a group that we're working with. We just started working with at some Metro Parks called Organic Connects. And they're a little more conservation in general oriented, but they are a group that are looking to provide experience and familiarity to school-age kids, and then kind of mentorship to high school kids, and particularly focusing on the non-white audience. And one of the things that I think is so great about this organization that the director and I have talked about is the giving these mentorship and internship opportunities to kids who might not normally get them, because we all, I think something we kind of dance around sometimes is how people get jobs in archaeology. And a lot of times those are things that are born out of internships. Those are born out of seasonal positions. Those are born out of those kind of mentorship connections that people make. And if you're someone who might not have the opportunities to have those from the get-go, then that kind of puts you behind the eight ball in trying to form a foundation for a later career. So they're a group that is kind of working to close that gap. They work out of the Cleveland area, but they have partnerships with the Cleveland Metro Parks and a number of other organizations in this area. So anyway, I put the information, their website in the chat if anyone is interested.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. I think that's probably a good spot for us to close out for now, since it's 12:34. Some people may have already started munching on some sandwiches. Thank you again to all of the panelists today for participating and some good conversation. Like I said, I feel like the big word being inspired, like there's some cogs moving in my head. There's definitely going to be some follow-up emails to all of you with some ideas. And we will continue this dialogue and this discussion and brainstorming. And so this is not a one and done thing. And I'm seeing some other people saying thank you. At this time, we're going to break for lunch. I don't know if Kevin's going to leave up WebEx. I assume so, and we'll just sort of have it here. We're going to shift around the schedule because we had someone who's unfortunately unable to present in the afternoon. So Megan's actually going to present at 1, and I'm going to shift the business meeting to after Megan's presentation. That way she's not the sort of lone person presenting after a business meeting, because, just the way it is. So at 1, Megan's going to be presenting her second presentation, and then we'll do our business meeting after her presentation. So right now, I'm going to officially declare it lunchtime. So stick around.
jump in before everybody steps off for lunch and thank again all the panelists and invite any of you who are not OAC members to join OAC and to help us push forward all of the important things that you guys were talking about today. If you want to, we would definitely appreciate the help, and we need more members involved anyway. I'm really excited to see archaeology in the community in Ohio. I can't wait to see what you guys get there. But thank you for dedicating the time to come and talk to us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.